Hello everyone, David Adler here, President of the Australian Jewish Association. Now I have a very special guest from his car in Israel, Marc Zell, who is the lawyer to Avi Zinger, the Ben & Jerry's franchisee, who had an extraordinary victory in the BDS against Israel, against the product in Judea Samaria. We support Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria, so I thought I'd get in touch with Marc, and he's kindly agreed to talk to us about what happened and how he scored this incredible victory. Marc, Mazel Tov on the landmark victory, and I hope you'll let Avi know that he has support in Australia as well. Can you summarise what actually happened and how you were able to take on such a corporate giant as Unilever behind Ben & Jerry's and get a terrific outcome?
Well, first of all, David, thank you very much for having me on your program today. I'm in my car because this is probably the most quiet place where I can do this interview. While we're doing this, I'm also on a television station in Israel talking about President Biden's visit. So I've fled to the car so that I could give you the time and the quality environment. Anyway, thank you so much. Let me just say one thing at the outset. I was very privileged to represent Avi Zinger and his companies in this fight against BDS. I want to say, though, that I was not alone. I was part of a very special team that included Eliza Lewin and the Brandeis Center for Human Rights in the United States, and her father, the distinguished American litigator Nat Lewin. We all worked together to make this happen, and I was very honored to be part of that team as well. And my role was not only as a litigator, but also as a negotiator of the settlement with Unilever, which we can talk about during the course of the interview to the extent that it's permitted under the terms of that agreement. Anyway, the background is like this. For 35 years, Avi Zinger and his companies were licensees, not franchisees, David, licensees.
Okay,
and really, it's okay. The only licensee in the world that had that wasn't actually part of the Ben & Jerry's corporate enterprise, or later Unilever, the only licensee in the world that had the right to manufacture, distribute, and sell Ben & Jerry's ice cream products throughout the state of Israel, Judea and Samaria, and what later became the Palestinian territories, areas A and B under the Oslo agreements. So, and this went on famously. He started from scratch in the 1980s and built it up into, perhaps it was the leading premium ice cream brand in all of Israel. And not only was he successful economically, but he believes in, to the extent that it remains relevant, and performed exceptionally in furthering Ben & Jerry's social missions. That's something that's very important to the brand, that they care about certain social missions, which are rather progressive, let's put it that way. And Avi Zinger, throughout the years, promoted those social missions by establishing programs here in Judea and Israel and Judea and Samaria that would draw Israelis and Palestinian Arabs together. I'll just give you one example, a program called MEET, M-E-E-T, which was established in conjunction with MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is designed to train Israeli and Palestinian Arab students in entrepreneurial matters. And it was a 3-year program, and it was extremely successful. And when the U.S. government cut off support for the program, Avi stepped in also and financed it. So, and it was amazing success. And it was just one of a whole list of these kinds of programs, which were designed really not for any political purpose, but really just to make people's lives better. And
sounds a bit like SodaStream. A little bit like SodaStream.
Yeah, Yeah, I know Peter Weisberg, who founded SodaStream, it was a client of mine and a fantastic fellow, and the company also was concerned about that. But Avi Zinger is really unique because he's not only a great businessman, as he's demonstrated by the success of his activity, but over the years, but he's also just a remarkable human being. He's not in it to boost his ego or to advance any kind of political agenda. He's just a mensch, Ben Adam, we say in Hebrew, mensch. Fantastic man. I have the highest regard for him. Now, what happened after 35 years, the BDS movement, your viewers are probably familiar with BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which is basically a Palestinian Arab attempt to delegitimize the entire state of Israel any way they can. They were putting pressure on the Ben & Jerry's subsidiary in the United States in Vermont to cease selling Ben & Jerry's ice cream in Jewish settlements in Judea and Samaria. In fact, they basically said to cease selling Ben & Jerry's ice cream throughout what they would call the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Okay, that was in Gaza. It wasn't just limited to Jewish settlements. However, it turns out that for reasons that I can explain later on, that what they were really doing was try to stop Ben & Jerry's from selling its ice cream products anywhere in Israel, plus the other areas that we're talking about. And they saw this as an important target, because if they could get the Ben & Jerry's to stop doing business in Israel, this would give a big boost to their boycott efforts with other companies around the world. And Ben & Jerry's was really one of the first companies in the world to start emphasizing social mission, which they call today ESG programs, as to incorporate it into their corporate governance programs. So this was a big target for them. And they finally succeeded in around 2018, 19, 20. They succeeded in getting the board of directors in the Vermont company, which has a certain autonomy when it comes to social missions, social issues, even though they were bought by and merged into Unilever in the year 2000. Okay, and this is really important because it's going to come up again, and we'll talk about it. There's a hearing actually tonight in the United States about this very issue. So what happened is 2021, Ben & Jerry's board of the United States made a statement that they were not going to renew Avi Zinger's contract in Israel, which was to expire on its own terms on December 31st, 2022, and they were going to stop selling their ice cream in the territories. Immediately after that, Unilever, the parent, came on and made an announcement of its own on that same day, saying that, well, okay, they may agree with Ben & Jerry's about the territories. Unilever was going to continue selling inside Israel. And then Ben & Jerry's came back the same day and said, Unilever, the parent company, had no right to say that, okay? And they attacked their parent company. This is a year ago. Well, in following that, we filed a lawsuit in federal court in New Jersey, attacking the decision of Ben & Jerry's and the Unilever companies to refuse to renew our agreement, okay, on the grounds that the reason why we couldn't agree to their terms is because it was illegal to do so under Israeli law, under the Israeli anti-discrimination law and under the Israeli anti-boycott law. In addition, it would violate laws and policies of the United States and many states, which had begun in the wake of that July 21 announcement to divest their investments, their pension funds from Unilever as a protest against what they did.
Sure.
So in March of 22, we filed this lawsuit and followed it up immediately with a request for a preliminary injunction to bar it. And to make a long story short, David, what happened is in the wake of that lawsuit, Unilever had a change of heart, and they approached us and they decided they suggested selling the entire Ben and Jerry's business in Israel and Judea and Samaria and the Palestinian territories to Avi Zinger in perpetuity. And that's exactly what happened. We worked that out. There were extensive negotiations. I can't go into details.
Sure.
And they resulted in a comprehensive settlement and an agreement to transfer the entire business in perpetuity within that territory, Israel, Judea and Samaria, and Palestinian territories, to Avi Zinger and his companies. And that's where we are today. An amazing victory, something that we didn't even anticipate. This idea that Avi would now have the right to continue this business, manufacture, distribute, and sell Ben and Jerry's products, the same products with the same ingredients, the same formulas and everything, same packaging, with one exception, and that is that the logo, the actual Ben and Jerry's logo, would look exactly the same, except that the word Ben and Jerry's would be written in Hebrew and Arabic and not in English. At the same time, Unilever agreed that even they would not be able to, and no one would be able to use the English trademarks in Israel, Judea and Samaria, and the Palestinian territory. So it was an absolute victory for Avi Zinger and his companies. Amazing, just amazing.
Mark, I need to ask you, to what extent do you think Unilever was motivated, on the one hand, by the lawsuit that you filed in New Jersey, or was it simply a commercial force? Because we know that a number of the American states, as you said, were starting to pull their investments out of Unilever. We heard that it was a total of $1 billion or so, and it wasn't really out of the goodness of their heart. They just saw, a part of the foundation of their share price running away.
Well, look, I'm sure there were many, and actually I do know a lot more about this, but I'm really bound not to discuss it by the agreement. So you'll permit me not to go into that. But I can tell you that we have an expression in Hebrew that says the straw that broke the camel's back. That
Sure.
was the lawsuit. Okay. Because
Okay.
all those other things that you mentioned happened early on in August and September and October of 21. Unilever didn't change any of its policies. Okay. But within weeks, and I can tell you, days even after the lawsuit was filed in New Jersey, the dam broke and everything changed. So I want to give credit to Unilever for this, because they took the opposite position initially in the New Jersey litigation and in their public statements. But they had a change of mind, and they came out. And this is very important, because in their announcement that they made on the day that this whole deal closed, on June 29th of this, just last month, they made a very powerful statement against the BDS movement. They say that they did not support it, and they won't support anything that amounts to hate and anti-Semitism. This is something that we insisted on in the negotiations, and they agreed to do this. We didn't have to twist their arm about this. They realized that this was the right thing to do, and we're very, very grateful to the Unilever management in Europe and in the United States, North America, for their decision to take this, which I consider a very courageous step on their part.
Okay. Look, thank you so much, Mark. I know that you're squeezing this in between commitments, so I do want to thank you for your time. As we discussed earlier, you will get an invitation to, if you're willing to participate in a more substantive discussion, and we'd like to talk to you about what you've learnt about combating BDS generally. That we've had some BDS events in Australia, a significant one in Sydney earlier this year, and we'd like the benefit of your experience and wisdom. But we'll do that another time.
I would be delighted, but with your permission, just one more statement, David.
Go for it.
Because it's really quite timely. After all of this happened with our settlement with Unilever on June 29th, just about a week ago, Ben & Jerry's in Vermont, the subsidiary, filed a lawsuit against their own parent company.
Yes, we heard about that.
We've opposed that, and the judge quite correctly refused their request for a temporary restraining order last week, but has set the matter in for a hearing tonight at 11:45 Israel time, 3:45 America time. It's probably going to be something like 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning your time. But this hearing is on the motion for a preliminary injunction that the Ben & Jerry's Vermont company has filed. It's going to be a very interesting hearing. And hopefully when we get together again, David, we'll have the results and we'll be able to discuss that latest development, hopefully, which will turn out positively. We're cautiously optimistic.
Well, big mazel tov to you. I mean, the work you're doing is not just for Avi Zinger, it's for the interests of Israel generally, and therefore the interests of the Jewish people generally.
Absolutely.
And that's why we take a big interest in it. Please pass to Avi our congratulations and let him know, as I said, that there is support in Australia as well. We'll look forward to talking to you in more detail, perhaps in 6 or 8 weeks or so. Thank you so much.
Excellent, David. Thank you, and thank you for having me.